congressional redistricting map, as I said that I would. And so we have a veto message that has attached this stellar memo by our general counsel, Ryan Newman, who lays out what he has been saying from the very beginning as to why the approach that the legislature took was defective. In their, I guess, understandable zeal to try to comply with what they believe the Florida Constitution was required, they forgot to make sure what they were doing complied with the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And so I think that this is a very, very cogent analysis of what we see as the problems. Later this afternoon, I will be issuing a proclamation to do a special legislative session. That is going to be in the middle of April. We're working on the precise dates with the legislative leaders, but I would count on sometime after Easter. We will be able to come back in and be able to get this across the finish line. So I want to thank our GC for doing this, and that veto is official. And with that, we're happy to take questions about any of these. So here's what I would.
Are you taking the position that you think that ultimately there needs to be litigation that would maybe knock out just that portion, or do you think all of fair districts needs to go and should be tossed aside?
Well, look, I think our goal in this was just to have a constitutional map. We were not trying to necessarily plot any type of litigation strategy. I think if you did a map along the lines that we had proposed, that will be challenged. And there'll be plaintiffs that will say that that big district in North Florida, the District 5, that's diminishment and that must be put in. And they're going to ask courts, most likely state courts up to the Florida Supreme Court, to put that district back in, and they will cite that provision of the Florida Constitution. We will obviously say it's unconstitutional to draw a district like that where race is the only factor. And so that will be a decision. That probably is enough to resolve the map. However, if it got to the point where you said that this is what the Florida Constitution requires 100%, and the non-diminishment has not been fully vetted or fleshed out because we've only had one redistricting cycle. We basically said non-diminishment means you can't diminish a VRA-protected majority-minority district like that. That's the maximum it could be and satisfy the federal Constitution. If they believe that, well, then obviously this would not be implicated and they could uphold the map. If they didn't believe it, if they did the legislators' analysis where even a 30% couldn't be diminished, well, then I think then you run into where the redistricting amendments become problematic. And I do think, just as a constitutional matter, the diminishment only applied under Section 5. It doesn't even apply anymore, but at the time, it only applied under covered jurisdictions. There was pervasive evidence in the middle part of the 20th century of basically not allowing very many people to vote based on race. And so you had very tough medicine, but there was a showing as to why using race in that regard was something that was appropriate. The redistricting amendments in Florida just said the entire state with no showing that it would be appropriate to use race in that fashion. I think that raises huge constitutional concerns. I also think there's an internal inconsistency in Florida's redistricting amendments in the Tier 1. Because on the one hand, it says you can't use criteria that would favor an incumbent or a political party. But on the other hand, you say that you have to allow under Section 2 minority candidate to elect a candidate the choice. The problem is when they do that functional analysis, what is the functional analysis leading to? It is leading to a partisan analysis because the analysis is, can the district elect an African-American Democrat? So you have to consider partisanship to be able to satisfy that. So I think that there's an internal inconsistency there. So to sum up, does it mean that the fair districts will necessarily have to be challenged? No, because they can interpret that non-diminishment provision saying it doesn't apply short of a majority-minority district, and then I don't think it would raise that. If they say non-diminishment applies to any district based on whatever, even 30%, 35%, then I think that puts that in peril in terms of how that would do under the 14th Amendment.